You know, one of the most peculiar, and yet most inevitable experiences on the path of awakening is the discovery, the rather startling discovery, that you are changing in ways that others around you are not. It creeps up on you, quite subtly at first, like a shift in the weather, until suddenly you realize you are standing in a completely different landscape than the people you have known your entire life. And this creates a very strange, very wobbly predicament. It is not merely a difference of opinion, it is a divergence of being. It is rather like what happens when a caterpillar begins to transform into a butterfly. Now, consider the caterpillar. It lives in a world of crawling, of consuming, of moving very slowly along a singular plane. But when the transformation begins, it doesn't just sprout wings. No, it must disintegrate. It enters the chrysalis and literally dissolves into a kind of biological soup before restructuring into something entirely new. Imagine doing this while still surrounded by caterpillars who are quite content to remain caterpillars, who look at you and say, "Why are you falling apart? Why can't you just keep eating leaves like a sensible creature?" Now, I want to talk about this because it is something that almost everyone who begins to wake up, who begins to see through the cosmic game, will encounter. And I must be honest with you, it can be one of the most isolating, confusing, and yes, dangerous experiences you will ever face. When I say dangerous, I do not necessarily mean that you will come to physical harm, though, of course, historically, societies have not always been kind to their mystics and their heretics. But I mean dangerous in a much more profound psychological sense. It is dangerous because you risk losing the scaffolding of your life. You risk losing everything that once gave you a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, and that warm, fuzzy blanket of security that comes from being just like everyone else. Let me begin by laying down a fundamental truth: growth is not comfortable. It never has been, and it never will be. We have this romantic notion in the West that spiritual growth is all bliss and light and feeling wonderful. But real growth is destructive before it is creative. Consider the lobster. It is a soft, mushy animal that lives inside a rigid shell. That rigid shell does not expand. So, as the lobster grows, that shell becomes a prison. It becomes tight, confining, suffocating. The lobster feels pressure, discomfort, perhaps even pain. Now, to survive, the lobster must go under a rock formation, safe from the predatory chaos of the ocean, and cast off its shell. It must shed the only protection it has ever known and expose itself, soft, pink, and incredibly vulnerable, to the world. It must wait there, naked and trembling, until a new shell forms. During that time, it is in grave danger. Every predator in the ocean, every passing fish, would love to make a meal of a soft-shelled lobster. But here is the crucial point: if the lobster refuses to shed its shell, if it clings to the safety of what it knows because it fears the vulnerability of the unknown, it cannot grow. It will eventually die, suffocated by its own protection. It will remain stunted, confined, unable to realize its full potential. Human beings are much the same way, though our shells are not made of calcium. Our shells are made of our beliefs, our rigid dogmas, our social roles, our relationships, and our agreed-upon ways of understanding the world. These are the structures we build to feel safe. And when we outgrow them, when our consciousness expands beyond the container society has built for us, we become vulnerable. We lose the protection of the crowd, the comfort of conformity, the deep mammalian security of being part of the herd. And this vulnerability, this radical exposure to the truth of things, is what I mean by danger. Now, we must be very careful here. What does it actually mean to outgrow those around you? It is vital that we define this correctly, or we fall into the trap of spiritual pride. It does not mean that you have become superior. It does not mean you are better, or holier, or more evolved, in a hierarchical sense than your parents, your friends, or your colleagues. That is a trap, a seductive trap, that many people fall into. And ironically, falling into that trap is a sign that they haven't really grown at all. They have simply traded one form of ego inflation, perhaps the ego of the successful businessman, for another form, the ego of the spiritual person. They are still playing the game of, I am this, just wearing different costumes. No. Outgrowing others simply means that you have begun to see things that they do not see yet. You have tuned into a different frequency. It means you have started to ask questions that they haven't even thought to ask. You have stepped out of the agreed-upon framework of reality, the social contract, the consensus trance, while they remain comfortably, and perhaps happily, within it. Think about the typical life path in our culture. We are given a script the moment we are born. Go to school, get good grades, get a job, find a partner, buy a house with a 30-year mortgage, accumulate stuff, save for retirement, and then die. It is a very specific game. And for millions of people, that game is enough. It provides structure. It provides meaning. But for you, something has shifted. Perhaps you have begun to question the values that everyone takes for granted. You look at the frantic pursuit of wealth, the obsession with status, the desperate need for security, the endless accumulation of possessions that we buy with money we don't have to impress people we don't like. You look at the endless distractions, the television, the internet, the entertainments that fill up every silence in our lives, and you start to feel a sense of unease. Perhaps you've begun to see that these things don't actually lead to happiness. You see them for what they are, empty promises. You see the carrot on the stick, and you realize you are never going to catch it. You realize that these pursuits are symptoms of a deeper malaise, a fundamental misunderstanding about what life is and what we are. You start to see the hollowness of the plastic reward society offers. Or perhaps your awakening didn't come through intellectual questioning. Perhaps you've had experiences, direct, undeniable experiences. Maybe through deep meditation, through contemplation of nature, through a life crisis or the loss of a loved one. Maybe through psychedelics, or through some spontaneous opening of the heart while walking down the street. Whatever the catalyst, something has shown you that reality is far more mysterious, far more fluid, and far more consciousness dependent than the solid, objective, external world of things that everyone believes in. You've seen through the illusion of the separate self, the little me inside the head that is constantly afraid and constantly wanting. You've caught a glimpse behind the curtain of the cosmic drama, and now, the problem is, you can't unsee it. You cannot go back to sleep. And when this happens, when the blinders come off, you find yourself in a very odd, very lonely position. You are living in two worlds simultaneously, and they do not mesh. When this happens, you find yourself in a very odd position. You are living in two worlds simultaneously. There's the conventional world, the world of commerce and politics and daily routine, the world of deadlines and social media notifications and arguing about which brand of coffee is superior. It is the world where everyone is playing their roles, wearing their masks, and, most importantly, taking it all tremendously seriously. It is the real world, as they call it, though you have begun to suspect it is the most elaborate fantasy of all. It is a collective agreement, a hypnotic trance woven from shared anxieties and desires. And then there is this other dimension. This deeper reality that is always present, that hums beneath the noise of the everyday. It is the world of stillness, of interconnectedness, of profound mystery. It is the feeling you get when you look at a tree and suddenly see it for the first time, not as an object, but as an unfolding process of life. It is the sudden, gut-wrenching realization that you are not separate from the sky, the stars, or the person you most despise. You have seen, perhaps only for a moment, that the separate self, this isolated me you've been taught to be, is a social convention and a neurological habit. You've seen that you are, in fact, a mode of the entire universe expressing itself. The problem is, the vast majority of people are completely, utterly oblivious to this second dimension. They are asleep inside the dream, and they do not know they are dreaming. And you? You must learn to navigate both worlds. This is the great challenge. You must learn to speak two languages, fluently. You must learn the language of the marketplace, how to pay your taxes, how to discuss the weather, how to navigate family gatherings. But you must also cultivate the language of the mystic, the language of silence, of poetry, of being, rather than doing. You must, as the old saying goes, learn to be in the world but not of it. This is an extraordinarily difficult tightrope to walk. What does it mean? It means you participate in the game of society, but you are no longer fooled by it. You play your role, but you play it consciously, as an actor on a stage who knows he is an actor. He may play the king, or the beggar, or the villain, but he never forgets that off-stage, his true identity is something else entirely. Most people, you see, are actors who have forgotten they are acting. They are the king. They are the beggar. They believe their mask is their face. Your awakening is simply the process of remembering that it is a mask. And this creates immense friction. Because the two worlds have different rules, different values, different ways of making sense of experience. The conventional world operates on fear, desire, competition, and the illusion of time. It is obsessed with getting somewhere, with becoming something. The mystical world operates on love, acceptance, cooperation, and the reality of the eternal present. It is not about becoming, it is about being. So, you look at the people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, and you love them. You genuinely do. But you realize, with a quiet and sometimes painful clarity, that they are still operating entirely within the conventional framework. They are still asleep, dreaming the social dream. They are worried, genuinely worried, about their careers, their mortgages, their social standing, their plans for the future. They are concerned with office politics, with the new car they want to buy, with what the neighbors think. And these concerns, which perhaps just a year ago seemed so important, so pressingly real to you, now seem rather trivial. They seem beside the point. This is a very difficult place to be. It is not because you have become callous or indifferent. It is not that you feel superior, as we discussed. It is simply that you have seen a larger context. It is like you were all playing a game of Monopoly, and you were obsessed with buying Park Place, and suddenly you've looked up and seen the stars. And now, you're looking at the board, and you just can't take the little plastic houses as seriously as you used to. But everyone else at the table is still deadly serious, and they are upset that you are no longer mortgaging your properties with the same enthusiasm. But you cannot simply tell them this. This is the great loneliness. You cannot sit down with your family at Thanksgiving dinner and say, you know, I have had a profound realization that the self is an illusion, that linear time is a construct, and that we are all manifestations of one universal consciousness. Also, please pass the potatoes. They will look at you as if you have lost your mind. They will exchange worried glances. They will think you have joined a cult, or perhaps are having a breakdown. And in a sense, you have broken down the old mind. You have lost the conventional, socially conditioned mind, and you haven't yet fully articulated, even to yourself, what you have found in its place. You are in between. So you remain silent. Or you speak in hints and suggestions, in metaphors that people find poetic but do not quite grasp. Or you try, desperately, to find other people who understand what you are going through. And this is where the isolation truly begins. Because the people you have known all your life, the people you love and care deeply about, increasingly seem to be living in a different reality than you are. You are speaking different languages, pursuing different goals, seeing the world through entirely different lenses. It is a chasm, and it is widening. And they sense this, even if they cannot articulate it. They feel your pull away. They sense that you are no longer quite one of them, that you have changed in some fundamental, disquieting way. They notice that you are not playing the game with the same enthusiasm you once had. You are not as invested in the drama. You don't react with the same alarm or the same excitement. And this, my friend, makes them deeply uncomfortable. De ro. De la fan 3/4, de duoc lam sach, kong chua, music. Title, What Happens When You Can No Longer Relate to Society, Alan Watts Part 3 of 4, cleaned. This change in you threatens them. Why? Because your awakening, your simple, quiet non-participation in the collective anxiety, is a mirror. And in that mirror, they may, for just a moment, see the artificiality of their own lives. If you can step outside the agreed-upon framework, then maybe the framework isn't as solid, as real, as permanent as they thought. And if the framework isn't real, then maybe their own lives, built entirely upon that framework, are built on sand. This is a terrifying thought for a consciousness that has identified itself completely with the game. So, they may respond in various ways. These responses are almost always unconscious, driven by fear. Some will try to pull you back. They will try to normalize you, to get you to be the way you used to be, the person they were comfortable with. You've changed, they will say. And you will note, from the tone in their voice, that it is not a compliment. They will accuse you of becoming strange, impractical, irresponsible, self-absorbed. You're not thinking about your future, you're not taking things seriously, you're neglecting your duties. They will remind you of your obligations, your responsibilities, your place in the social order. They will do everything they can, with guilt, with logic, with emotional appeals, to squeeze you back into the box that you have so painfully outgrown. Others will not be so direct. They will simply distance themselves from you. They will find you, well, boring. Or preachy. Or simply incomprehensible. The conversations that once flowed so easily, gossip, complaints about work, plans for the weekend, now feel forced and superficial. There is a lag, an awkwardness. You have less and less in common. What you find fascinating, they find abstract. What they find fascinating, you find trivial. And so, the friendship or the relationship gradually withers. Not through any dramatic break, not through an argument, but through a slow, sad, silent drifting apart, like two continents moving in opposite directions. Still others, and this is the most difficult, may become actively hostile. This is particularly true if you have outgrown a religious or ideological framework that they are still deeply invested in. If you were raised in a particular faith, and you have moved beyond the dogma, beyond the words and into the direct experience of the divine, they will not see this as growth. If you have questioned the infallible dogmas and found them, well, wanting, your very existence becomes a profound threat to those who still believe. You are a heretic. You are an apostate. You are a lost soul who must be saved, or, if you cannot be saved, you must be shunned or attacked. Your peace is a threat to their war. Your freedom is an insult to their chains. This is the danger I am speaking of. Not that you will be physically harmed, necessarily, though we must not be naive about history, but that you will lose your community. You will lose your tribe. You will lose that fundamental, animal sense of belonging to something larger than yourself. Human beings are social creatures. We are hardwired for connection. We need to feel that we are part of a group, that we are understood and accepted. And when you outgrow those around you, you risk losing all of that. You risk becoming an outcast. Now, at this point, you might say, well, why not just keep quiet about it? Why not simply maintain the facade? Play along, keep your insights to yourself, go to the parties, talk about the weather, and inwardly know the truth. And indeed, many people do exactly this. They live double lives. They maintain the conventional appearance while privately knowing that it is all a game, all a performance. And there is a certain pragmatic wisdom in this approach. As I've said before, you don't shake someone awake from a pleasant dream unless the house is on fire. You don't go around puncturing people's illusions just to prove you are right. But there are deep, profound problems with this strategy of silence. First, it is exhausting. Living a double life, constantly monitoring what you say, editing your thoughts, pretending to care about things that no longer matter to you, this takes a tremendous toll on your nervous system. You become alienated not just from others, but from yourself. You become split, fragmented. The very integration and wholeness you have been seeking through your spiritual growth becomes impossible, because you are constantly, in small ways, betraying your own truth. Second, it is inauthentic. And authenticity, being true to what you have discovered, is the essential nutrient of the spiritual path. If you have seen something true, something real, something that has fundamentally shifted your center of gravity, and you then hide it, you deny it, you refuse to live by it, then what was the point of seeing it in the first place? You become like someone who has discovered an infinite treasure but is too afraid to spend it. So they bury it in the ground and continue to live in poverty. Third, and perhaps most importantly, you cannot hide. Your very presence, even if you say nothing, communicates something. People are not stupid, they pick up on energy, on vibration, on the unspoken. If you have genuinely transformed, if you have genuinely outgrown the conventional framework, it will show in 1,000 subtle ways, in the quality of your attention, in your lack of reactivity, in your responses to crisis and difficulty, in what you laugh at and what you now refuse to take seriously, in the very way you move through the world. They will sense that you are present in a way they are not, and it will intrigue them or it will frighten them, but they will sense it. So, you are faced with a profound dilemma. You cannot go back. You cannot unsee what you have seen, or unknow what you have known. The caterpillar cannot decide to become a caterpillar again. But you cannot fully go forward either, at least not without consequences, not without losses, not without a period of profound loneliness and disorientation. This is the passage. This is what the mystics of all traditions have always called the dark night of the soul. It is the passage between the old life and the new, the death of the caterpillar before the emergence of the butterfly. And it is dark precisely because you have left behind the familiar landmarks, the comfortable certainties of the old world, but you have not yet arrived at the new dispensation. You are in between. You are in limbo. You are in the wilderness. During this time, while you are in the wilderness, you may feel utterly alone. You may wonder if you have made a terrible mistake. You may question your sanity. You may look back at the normal life you left behind, and it may seem, in retrospect, wonderfully simple. You may long for the days when life was simpler, when you fit in, when you didn't question everything, when you could just go along with the program like everyone else and believe in it. The siren song of conformity is very loud when you are alone in the dark. But here is what you must understand, and you must hold on to this. This loneliness, this sense of profound isolation, is not a sign that you have gone wrong. It is not a punishment. It is a sign that you are going right. It is an inevitable, necessary stage in the process of transformation. Every hero in every myth that humanity has ever told must leave the village. They must leave the comfort of the known, venture into the unknown forest, into the dark, and they must face their dragons and their demons alone before they can return with the treasure. The treasure, in this case, is your authentic self. It is your true nature, freed from the decades of conditioning and programming that society has layered upon you. But you cannot claim this treasure, you cannot find this inner gold, while still clinging to the approval and acceptance of those who represent that very conditioning. You must, for a time, be willing to stand alone. You must be willing to be misunderstood, to be criticized, to be seen as strange, to be rejected. Now, I want to be very, very clear about something, because this is where the spiritual ego can hijack the entire process. This willingness to stand alone does not mean you should go out of your way to alienate people. It does not mean you should become arrogant, or cold, or superior. It does not mean you should go around rejecting everyone who doesn't share your newfound level of understanding. That would simply be spiritual egoism, and it is just another trap, another form of separation, another mask. What it means is that you accept the consequences of your growth with grace and with compassion. You understand that people are where they are. They are at their own stage of development, and they are doing the best they can with the level of consciousness they have. You do not judge them or look down on them. You simply recognize, without malice, that you are on different paths, at least for now. You offer them love, but you no longer offer them your authenticity as a sacrifice to their comfort. And you must trust. You must trust that if you are meant to have community, if you are meant to have companions on this journey, they will appear. Because here is the wonderful, mystical part of the process. When you outgrow one level, when you shed one shell, you do not remain alone forever. It only feels that way. Eventually, you find others who have also outgrown that level. You discover a new community, a new tribe, a new set of companions who speak your language, who understand your experience, who are wrestling with the same profound questions that you are. This is why spiritual seekers throughout history have formed communities. This is the origin of monasteries, of ashrams, of mystery schools, of philosophical circles. It is not because they were elitist or exclusive. It is because they needed to be with others who understood what they were experiencing. They needed a container, a safe space where they could be vulnerable, where they could be supported through the difficult transitions, where someone could look them in the eyes when they felt they were going crazy and say, "No, you are not crazy. The path is real. Keep going. The struggle is worthwhile." But these communities, these true companions, are often hidden. Or at least, they are not obvious. They do not advertise on billboards. They do not proselytize. You find them when you are ready. You find them when your seeking becomes sincere enough, when your loneliness becomes acute enough, that you are willing to be open and authentic. And often, you find them in the most unexpected places, a chance conversation with a stranger on a train, a book that seems to fall into your hands at exactly the right moment, a teacher who appears, as the saying goes, just when the student is ready. The key is not to cling desperately to the old relationships out of a fear of being alone. But also, not to cut ties prematurely out of a sense of spiritual pride. There is a middle way, as there always is. You maintain what connections you can maintain authentically. You honor your history, your roots, the people who loved you before you changed. But you do not betray yourself to preserve those connections. You do not make yourself small to make others comfortable. And sometimes, miraculously, the people around you grow, too. Sometimes your own transformation, your own quiet peace and authenticity, becomes the catalyst for their awakening. They see something in you, a peace, a clarity, a freedom from the anxieties that plague them, and they want it for themselves. They start asking questions. They start opening up. And then the relationship transforms along with you. It deepens. It becomes more real, more honest, more alive than it ever was before. But you cannot force this. You cannot make people grow. All you can do is be yourself, be authentic, be the living embodiment of what you have discovered, and trust that those who are ready will recognize it. The rest will fall away. And you must let them go, with love and gratitude for what they have given you, for the role they played in your journey, even if that role has now ended. The danger of outgrowing everyone around you, the danger of no longer relating to society, is real. You may lose friends, family members, communities that once defined you. You may go through periods of profound, aching loneliness. You may question whether it was worth it. But I can tell you, from my own experience and from observing countless others on this path, that on the other side of this danger is a freedom and an authenticity, a depth of being, that makes all the losses worthwhile. Because what you gain is yourself. Your true self. Not the self that was constructed by your parents and your society to fit in, to please others, to meet expectations. And once you have found that, once you have tasted that freedom, you realize that you were never really losing anything real. You were only losing illusions. You were losing masks, false identities, and chains. The real connections, the real love, the real community, these remain, or they appear anew, deeper and truer than before. So, if you find yourself in this place, know that you are not alone, even in your aloneness. Know that this is part of the process, part of the path. Know that it is temporary, this loneliness, this sense of being between worlds. And know that the courage it takes to keep growing, to keep being true to what you have seen, even when it costs you everything familiar, this courage is the mark of a genuine spiritual warrior, a true seeker of truth. The caterpillar must die for the butterfly to be born. There is no way around it. But what emerges is so much more beautiful, so much more free, so much more alive than what was lost. Trust the process. Trust your growth. And trust that life, in its infinite intelligence, is guiding you exactly where you need to go, even when the path leads through darkness and uncertainty.